In the polished reflection of a Harley-Davidson showroom window in Newmarket, Auckland, the line between a routine test drive and a life-altering tragedy blurred in a split second. It was April 2019, a day that would etch itself into the history of New Zealand's underworld. Joshua Masters, a figure synonymous with the rise of the killer bees, had just returned from taking a powerful machine for a run, likely feeling the wind and the freedom of the road. But as he turned back into the service entrance, he wasn't met with a sales agent. He was met by a ghost from his past. Akustino Taye, a high-ranking enforcer for the Tribesmen, and a man who once called Masters a brother, was waiting in the shadows. The confrontation was swift and calculated, yet fate intervened in a way that defied probability. As Masters entered the zone of danger, Taye raised a black semi-automatic 9mm pistol. The silence of the afternoon was shattered by a single discharge. The projectile found its mark, striking Masters with devastating precision in the spinal cord, instantly robbing him of his mobility. What happened next, however, turned a targeted fatal act into a scene of chaotic survival. As the weapon attempted to cycle the next round, it jammed. Witnesses describe a tense struggle with mechanics rather than men. Taye attempted a manual reload, stepping closer to the fallen figure of his former ally. He pulled the trigger twice more, intending to finish what he had started, but the malfunction held. A third desperate attempt revealed the magazine was empty. Masters lay pinned beneath the heavy chrome of the motorcycle he had been riding, helpless on the asphalt, while the instrument of his potential demise failed to deliver the final blow. In the immediate wake of the chaos, Taye vanished from the scene, leaving behind a shattered victim and a crime scene that would baffle investigators. However, the manhunt was short-lived. In a surprising turn of events, Taye walked into a police station shortly after, surrendering himself to the authorities. He refused bail, seemingly accepting the gravity of the situation. But it was his appearance in the Auckland District Court that truly confused onlookers. Standing before the judiciary, the hardened enforcer didn't offer excuses. Instead, he expressed profound regret. He spoke of seeking restorative justice, a legal avenue designed to repair the harm caused by a crime through dialogue between the victim and the offender. It was a plea that hinted at a deep, fractured history. When questioned about his connection to the man he had just grievously injured, Taye's words were heavy with emotion. "Josh was my brother. I loved him. He always had my back, and I had his." Yet, despite this public declaration of remorse, Masters refused to participate in the process. The specific catalyst that turned these inseparable allies into mortal enemies remains one of the underworld's most closely guarded secrets. Both men have adhered to a strict code of silence, leaving the public and the authorities to wonder what betrayal was deep enough to lead to such a violent intersection. Initially facing the most severe charges possible for the attack, Taye negotiated a plea to a lesser count of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. The judicial system handed down a 7-year sentence, but the reverberations of this verdict traveled far beyond the courtroom walls. The incident sent tremors through the New Zealand underworld, not merely because a high-profile figure like Joshua Masters had been targeted, but because of the deep, tangled history between the aggressor and the victim. To understand the gravity of this betrayal, we have to look back at what they built together. Taye and Masters weren't just associates. They were the architects of a movement. In the early 2000s, a volatile new era of street organizations began to spread across Auckland. At the center of this shift were the killer bees. Far from a disorganized group of delinquents, the bees were designed with strategic intent. They functioned as a proving ground-feeder system for the Tribesmen, a historic and hardened motorcycle club with deep entrenchments in South Auckland. Those on the inside describe Masters as a leader possessed of both charisma and ruthless business acumen. He was a strategist who navigated the criminal hierarchy with a precision that earned him a senior rank within the Tribesmen itself. He stayed steps ahead of his rivals, building respect and fear in equal measure. However, even the most carefully constructed empires have their breaking points. In 2008, Masters' ascent was halted abruptly by a major law enforcement operation. Charges involving illicit substances and complex money laundering resulted in a sentence of 10 years and 5 months. Yet, as is often the case in this world, physical confinement did not equal a loss of power. In fact, the isolation of prison provided the perfect incubator for the organization to evolve. By the time Masters walked free in May 2018, the Killer Bees had transformed. No longer just a loose collection of street youth, they had exploded into a force 300 strong, referring to themselves as the Swarm. Inside the correctional system, the Swarm gained a reputation for intense, unyielding dominance over both fellow inmates and guards. They had climbed the ranks to become the fourth largest gang in the nation. Masters returned to a world that had changed, leading an army that was hungry for recognition. But less than 12 months after his release, the unthinkable happened. The leader was taken down by one of his own. The tragedy at the Harley-Davidson dealership left Masters with injuries that many believed he would not survive. He pulled through, but the physical toll was immense. He was left paralyzed, requiring full-time care. While he fought for his life in rehabilitation, the streets of Otara were shifting under his feet. The loyalty of the Swarm began to fracture. Many of the original members, once loyal to Masters, abandoned the Bees' colors to pledge full allegiance to the Tribesmen, reclaiming the territory they had once ruled as a united front. When Masters finally re-emerged, making a rare appearance at a 2022 gathering on a custom quad bike, it wasn't a reunion. It was a declaration of war. His return signaled a refusal to fade away, but it also ignited a powder keg. The reasons for the initial split between Masters and Taye remained shrouded in mystery, locked away by an unspoken code, but the consequences were visible to everyone. The Brotherhood was gone, replaced by a dangerous rivalry that threatened to consume the very streets they had once commanded together. The return of the fallen leader was not met with unity, but with a resurgence of hostility that turned the streets into a chessboard of dangerous moves. Masters' attempt to drag the Killer Bees back from the shadows, this time as a fully fledged gang, donning stark white patches, was a direct challenge to the established order. It demanded respect or it promised conflict. After a brief period of relative quiet, the friction reignited in 2022, spiraling into a series of retaliatory exchanges that put authorities on high alert. Auckland became the backdrop for a sequence of targeted firearm incidents and incendiary attacks on properties, a tit-for-tat cycle that threatened to breach the boundaries of the underworld and impact the civilian population. While serious physical injuries were fortunately minimized during this flare-up, the caliber of weaponry employed by both factions raised significant alarms. Law enforcement feared that the situation was devolving rapidly, driven by disputes that could have been about anything from territory to pure, unadulterated animosity. There was speculation that these public displays of force were calculated warnings messages sent through the barrel of a gun rather than spoken words. As the pressure mounted, the visibility of the conflict forced the hands of those involved. The unwanted attention from the public and the police pushed both groups to the brink of an unsustainable war. Eventually, through the intervention of senior members and law enforcement, a tentative ceasefire was negotiated, a fragile truce that has held the peace however tenuously since then. While this external battle raged, a different kind of struggle was taking place behind the concrete walls of the correctional facility. Akustino Taye had been fighting for his liberty since August 2021. His journey through the parole system was fraught with rejection. For nearly 5 years, his applications were denied, pushing the horizon of his freedom further away. In 2025, he presented a plan to reside at a property arranged by his family, claiming he had surrendered his patch and severed ties with the gang lifestyle. The parole board, however, remained unconvinced. They deemed the proposed location unsafe, citing the high probability that his presence would be quickly exposed in a small town, creating an unacceptable risk to both Taye and the surrounding community. They saw no new merit in the proposal and kept the doors locked. However, the relentless march of time and legal process eventually shifted in his favor. In his most recent hearing, the board granted Taye release to a supported accommodation facility. The conditions attached to this freedom are some of the strictest imaginable, designed to act as a digital and physical leash. For the next 6 months he is subject to an overnight curfew, monitored by electronic tracking, mandatory testing for substances, and a rigid prohibition on associating with any affiliates of either the Tribesmen or the Killer Bees. This release marks a critical juncture. The man who nearly ended the life of a rival boss is now walking free, reintegrating into a world that has not forgotten the events of 2019. The deep-seated animosity between him and the organization he once helped build remains a variable that no parole condition can fully control. Authorities are maintaining a state of high vigilance, aware that old alliances still hold power. and that the equilibrium of the underworld is often maintained by a thread. The looming question for observers is whether this piece is genuine, or if the shadow of past grievances will rise to disrupt the silence. For now, the story pauses here, suspended in the tension between a violent history and an uncertain future.